He was a black executive dressed in a $2,000 suit on his way to close the biggest deal of his career, but a gate agent decided his immaculate designer sneakers violated a dress code that seemingly only applied to him. For that, she had him escorted from the gate by airport security. She cost him the deal of a lifetime. What she didn't know was that her single power-crazed decision would cost the airline she worked for $80 million before her shift was even over. This is the real-life story of how a moment of profound disrespect triggered a corporate catastrophe and delivered a brutal, undeniable lesson in karma. Dr. Aaron Hayes adjusted the knot of his silk tie, the dark charcoal grey, a perfect complement to his bespoke navy suit. He wasn't a doctor of medicine, but of economics, a PhD earned with blood, sweat, and a mind that saw patterns in market chaos others missed. At 38, he was the Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions for Innovate Dynamics, a Silicon Valley powerhouse on the verge of becoming a legend. And today, Tuesday, October 14th, 2024, was the day he would cement his own legacy. He sat in the polished chrome and leather chair of the Summit Air Ascend Lounge at New York's JFK International Airport Terminal 4. Below him, the tarmac bustled with the mechanical ballet of 747s and A380s. The air hummed with the quiet energy of the elite investment bankers whispering into phones, tech entrepreneurs typing furiously on glowing laptops, and seasoned travelers who moved with an economy of motion that spoke of a life lived across time zones. Aaron was calm, but it was a manufactured calm, a discipline honed over years of high-stakes negotiations. Inside, a supernova of nervous energy was churning. In his briefcase, secured with a biometric lock, was the final red-lined contract for the acquisition of Nexus AI, a boutique artificial intelligence firm in Austin, Texas. Nexus AI wasn't just another startup. They had developed a proprietary machine learning algorithm that was poised to revolutionize supply chain management. It was the Holy Grail. The deal was worth $1.2 billion. His commission alone would be life-altering. More than the money, it was the culmination of an 18-month campaign. He had personally courted Nexus AI's enigmatic founder, a reclusive genius named David Chen, who was notoriously wary of corporate giants. Aaron had won him over not with bluster, but with genuine respect for his creation and a shared vision for its future. The final handshake, the signing, was a formality, but a necessary one. The meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Central Time in Austin. His flight Summit Air 715 was scheduled to depart at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, landing him in Austin, with just enough time for a quick lunch with the Nexus team before heading to their headquarters. Everything was timed to the minute. He took a sip of his black coffee, the bitterness grounding him. He looked down at his attire. Impeccable. The suit was from a tailor on Savile Row. The watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe, a gift to himself after his last successful acquisition. And on his feet, the only concession to Silicon Valley's more relaxed culture, a pair of pristine, limited edition Lanvin leather sneakers. They were minimalist solid black and cost more than most people's monthly rent. They were a statement of modern professionalism, a bridge between the old guard of Wall Street and the new vanguard of tech. They were, in a word, clean. He'd flown Summit Air dozens of times. He was an executive platinum member, their highest tier. He knew their policies, their staff, their fleet. He chose them for their perceived reliability, the very quality he needed most on a day like today. At 8:45 a.m., the boarding announcement for Flight 715 echoed softly through the lounge. Oren finished his coffee, slid his laptop into its sleeve, and snapped his briefcase shut. He walked with purpose, a man at the peak of his powers, moving toward a destiny he had meticulously crafted. The gate B32 was just a short walk away. He felt the familiar low-level anxiety that preceded every major event in his life, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of readiness. He had prepared for every contingency, every possible negotiation tactic from David Chen, every logistical hiccup. Or so he thought. He had not and could not prepare for Brenda Walsh. Brenda Walsh stood behind the podium at gate B32 like a sentry guarding a fortress. She had been a gate agent for Summit Air for 19 years. In that time, the glamour of the airline industry had faded, replaced by the relentless pressure of on-time departures, overbooked flights, and increasingly entitled passengers. She'd seen it all, and her patience had worn as thin as the polyester of her company-issued blazer. She wielded her authority, what little of it she had, with a rigid and uncompromising grip. The rule book was her Bible, and she was its most fervent preacher. The line moved smoothly at first. First-class uniformed military personnel families with small children. Then came the premier status members. Aaron stepped forward, pulling up the boarding pass on his phone. He offered a polite smile. "Good morning." Brenda didn't look up from her screen. She grunted a sound of bare acknowledgement and scanned his pass. The machine beeped green. But as Aaron moved to step past the podium, her eyes darted down, catching sight of his footwear. Her face, already set in a mask of stern indifference, tightened. "Hold on," she said. Her voice was flat, but carried the unmistakable edge of authority. Aaron paused, turning back. "Is there a problem?" "Your shoes," she said, finally lifting her gaze to meet his. Her eyes were small and suspicious. "They don't meet the dress code for our first-class cabin." Aaron blinked. He genuinely thought he had misheard her. He looked down at his immaculate black leather sneakers, then back at her. "I'm sorry, my shoes." "We have a dress code," she repeated, her voice louder now, drawing the attention of the passengers still in line. "No beachwear, no offensive slogans, and no athletic footwear. Sneakers are athletic footwear." A bemused smile touched Aaron's lips. This had to be a joke. "These are Lanvin leather dress sneakers. They're not athletic shoes. I'm not going to be running a marathon in them." He kept his tone light, reasonable. He was a negotiator after all. De-escalation was his specialty. "Sir, they have rubber soles and laces. They're sneakers," Brenda stated, as if explaining a complex theorem to a child. "The policy is clear. I can't let you board." The absurdity of the situation was staggering. The man in front of him had been wearing faded loafers that looked like they'd been rescued from a yacht fire. The woman behind him had on sequined Ugg boots, but his shoes were the problem. Aaron took a deep breath, his internal karma meter beginning to flash red. "I'm an executive platinum member," he said, keeping his voice level. "I've flown first class with you dozens of times wearing these exact shoes or similar ones. This has never been an issue before. I think there might be a misunderstanding of the policy." "There's no misunderstanding," Brenda snapped her authority, now swelling into open hostility. "Maybe other agents are too lazy to enforce the rules, but I'm not. It's my gate, my flight, my rules." The line behind Aaron was growing restless. Whispers started to ripple. He could feel the stares, a mixture of pity, annoyance, and uncomfortable curiosity. He was no longer Dr. Aaron Hayes, SVP of a major corporation. He was a problem, a black man being told he wasn't dressed appropriately by a white gate agent. The old familiar and deeply exhausting narrative was playing out in real time. "Ma'am, with all due respect, my attire is professional. I'm on my way to a critical business meeting. I cannot miss this flight." He leaned in, slightly lowering his voice. "Is there a supervisor I can speak to? Perhaps we can clear this up quickly." The request for a supervisor was to Brenda the ultimate challenge to her power. Her face flushed a blotchy red. "You think my supervisor is going to tell you something different, Martin?" she yelled, not taking her eyes off Aaron, a harried-looking man in a slightly better-fitting suit. Martin Cross scurried over. He was the station manager, a man whose primary skill was avoiding conflict, which usually meant siding with his employees to make the problem go away faster. "What's the issue, Brenda?" he asked, already looking tired. "This passenger refuses to accept the dress code," she announced triumphantly. "He's trying to board first class in gym shoes." Martin Cross looked from Brenda's indignant face to Aaron's composed but tense one. He glanced down at the shoes. They were clearly expensive, clearly not something you'd wear to a gym. But Brenda was his employee, and the passenger was a disruption. The path of least resistance was clear. "Sir, I'm sorry, but Brenda is correct," Martin said, his voice dripping with false empathy. "The policy does prohibit athletic-style shoes. We have to be consistent." Aaron felt a cold knot of fury tighten in his stomach. It wasn't about the shoes anymore. It was about the sheer, willful ignorance, the arbitrary exercise of power. "Consistent, please look around you. You are not being consistent. You are singling me out. Let's be very clear about what is happening here." Martin's face hardened. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the line. You're holding up the boarding process. We can try to rebook you on a later flight if you can find some more appropriate footwear." The condescension was a slap in the face. "Rebook me. My meeting is in less than 5 hours. There is no later flight." The supernova of nervous energy inside him was collapsing into a black hole of despair. He could feel the $1.2 billion deal his legacy slipping through his fingers because of a woman's power trip over a pair of shoes. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do," Martin said, crossing his arms. He was no longer trying to be helpful. He was ending the conversation. "This is going to have a catastrophic impact on my business," Aaron said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I promise you it will have a catastrophic impact on yours." Brenda scoffed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Aaron replied, holding her gaze. Martin had heard enough. "All right, that's it. You're being disruptive. I'm denying you boarding." He nodded to the side where 2 airport security officers who had been watching the commotion began to walk over. "Sir, you need to come with us." Humiliation washed over Aaron in a hot wave. The other passengers who had been a silent audience now averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the carpet pattern. He was being escorted away from his flight, from his deal, like a common criminal. As the officers led him away from the gate, he looked back over his shoulder. He saw Brenda Walsh, a smug, satisfied smirk on her face as she scanned the next passenger's ticket. She had won. She had enforced her rules. She had no idea she had just lit the fuse on an $80 million bomb. The world outside the bubble of Gate B-32 moved on. The jet bridge retracted. The cabin door was sealed. Summit Air Flight 715 pushed back from the gate precisely on time. For Brenda Walsh and Martin Cross, it was a minor victory in a day of small battles. They had enforced the policy, quelled a disruption, and maintained the schedule. They had forgotten about Dr. Aaron Hayes before the plane had even taxied to the runway. Aaron, however, was in a state of suspended animation, a strange, chilling calm that often follows a moment of profound shock. The airport security officers had been professional, if detached, leading him to the main Summit Air customer service desk in the terminal, and recounting Martin's version of the story, disruptive passenger denied boarding. They left him there, a man in a $2,000 suit with a biometric locked briefcase and nowhere to go. He stood for a moment, the cacophony of the terminal, the rolling suitcases, the final boarding calls for flights to Orlando and San Diego, the crying children fading into a dull roar. The clock on the wall read 9:38 a.m. The plane was in the air. The window of opportunity was closed. He sank onto a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, pulling out his phone. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing, calculating the cascading consequences. He had to make the calls. First to his CEO, Robert Maxwell, a man who respected results above all else. Robert picked up on the second ring. "Aaron, you in the air. Hope the flight's smooth. Everything's ready for your victory lap when you get back." Aaron's throat felt tight. "Robert, I'm not on the flight." The cheerful energy on the other end of the line evaporated. What do you mean you're not on the flight? Was it cancelled? No. Aaron said, his voice flat. "I was denied boarding." "Denied boarding? For what did you forget your ID?" "For my shoes," Aaron said. Silence. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the faint static of the connection. "I'm sorry," Robert finally said, his voice laced with disbelief. "Run that by me again. You were denied boarding on a flight to close $1 billion deal because of your shoes." Aaron explained the entire absurd encounter, his voice devoid of emotion, as he relayed the conversation with Brenda and Martin. He recounted the athletic footwear policy, the refusal to listen, the final act of being escorted away by security. As he spoke, he could practically hear Robert Maxwell's blood pressure rising. Robert was an old-school executive who had clawed his way to the top. He understood incompetence. He understood malice. But this level of arbitrary, self-destructive stupidity was outside his comprehension. "What's the airline?" Robert barked. "Summit Air." "Get me the station manager's name, the gate agent's name. Get me everything," Robert commanded. "I'm calling legal. I'm calling their corporate office. We're not done yet." "Can you get another flight?" Aaron was already scrolling through other airlines on his phone. "The next direct flight on another carrier doesn't land until 3:45 p.m. Central Time. I'd miss the meeting entirely. I could try to get a connection through Dallas, but it would still be too late." "And Chen?" Robert asked, his voice grim. David Chen, the founder of Nexus AI. Punctuality and respect were the twin pillars of his business philosophy. He had once walked out of a preliminary meeting with a competitor because their representatives were 7 minutes late. Being a no-show wasn't an option. "I have to call him Robert," Aaron said, dread coiling in his gut. "I have to tell him what happened." "Wait," Robert said. "Let me try to get Thornton on the phone first." Jeffrey Thornton, the CEO of Summit Air, a man known for his slick corporate image and ruthless cost-cutting measures. While Robert began his corporate warpath, Aaron made the call he dreaded most. He dialed David Chen's direct line. "Aaron." David's voice was calm and precise. "You should be in the air. I trust the journey is proceeding as planned." "David." Aaron began, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "There has been an unforeseen complication with my travel." He explained the situation again, this time feeling the full weight of the professional humiliation. He was explaining to the man whose genius he had championed that he had been grounded over a pair of shoes. He tried to frame it as an unfortunate, bizarre incident, but the absurdity was inescapable. David Chen was silent for a long moment after Aaron finished. When he finally spoke, his voice was cool, all the previous warmth gone. "So to be clear, Summit Air, your chosen carrier, has prevented you from attending our final meeting for a reason that is by any logical measure nonsensical." "That is an accurate summary, yes," Aaron said. "This deal," David said slowly, "was built on a foundation of precision, mutual respect, and flawless execution. It seems your organization's logistical planning has failed on a fundamental level. If a simple flight cannot be managed, it raises serious questions about the management of a multi-billion-dollar integration. David, this was not an Innovate Dynamics failure. This was a single airline employee. It does not matter. David cut him off. The result is the same. The meeting is at 2:00 p.m. You will not be here. The trust I had in this process has been compromised. I'm sorry, Aaron. The deal is off. Please inform Mr. Maxwell. I will have my legal team formalize the termination of our letter of intent. The line went dead. Aaron lowered the phone. A wave of nausea washed over him. The deal was dead. 18 months of work gone. His legacy vaporized. He looked at his briefcase. The contract inside was now just a sheaf of worthless paper. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert. Thornton's office won't put me through. They said he's in meetings. Their PR person offered me a $500 flight voucher and a canned apology for the inconvenience. I told them to go to hell. The market is going to get wind of the Nexus deal collapsing any minute. Brace yourself. Aaron leaned his head back against the cold wall. The black hole in his stomach was now a raging vortex. The unraveling had just begun. In the chaos of the confrontation at Gate B32, no one had noticed the 24-year-old travel vlogger sitting hunched in her seat phone in hand. Her name was Maya Jenkins, and her YouTube channel, Miles with Maya, had a modest but highly engaged following of 70,000 subscribers. She documented the highs and lows of travel, and she knew a dramatic moment when she saw one. When Brenda Walsh had first challenged Aaron, Maya had discreetly started recording. Her phone captured it all: Aaron's calm, reasoned arguments, Brenda's escalating hostility, Martin Cross's weak-willed siding with his employee, and the final mortifying moment when the two security officers led the impeccably dressed black man away like a threat. She had captured the smug look on Brenda's face. She had even zoomed in on Aaron's shoes, which looked sleek and stylish, even on her phone's screen. Once she was on the plane, and it was safely in the air, she started editing. She was a savvy storyteller. She didn't add dramatic music or flashy graphics. She let the raw footage speak for itself. She wrote a simple factual caption on my 9:30 a.m. Summit Air flight, SA 715, from JFK to Austin. This gentleman, an executive platinum member, flying first class, was denied boarding. The reason the gate agent said his designer leather sneakers were athletic shoes and violated the dress code. She refused to listen to reason or her supervisor and had him removed by security. He was calm and professional the entire time. I don't know who he is, but I know this was wrong. Shame on you, Orsa Summit Air. She included the hashtag #DosFlying while black at Summit. She posted the 90-second video to X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, then settled in for her flight. Before the plane's Wi-Fi cut out for takeoff, she saw it had a few dozen likes and a handful of retweets. By the time Flight 715 landed in Austin, the video was no longer a small ripple. It was a digital tsunami. The hashtag had mutated and spread. Summit Air Shame. Brenda the Gatekeeper. Dress Code Rebellion. The video had been picked up by major influencers, then by journalists, then by celebrities. By midday, it had millions of views. The names of Brenda Walsh and Martin Cross, clearly audible in the video, were being shared everywhere. Amateur internet sleuths had already found their LinkedIn profiles. Back in New York, Aaron was still sitting at the airport, trying to coordinate with Robert Maxwell on a damage control strategy for the now-dead Nexus deal when his phone began to explode. Friends, former colleagues, even distant relatives were sending him the link to Maya's video. He watched it once, a strange, out-of-body experience. He saw himself impossibly composed. He saw Brenda, her face a mask of petty tyranny. He heard his own voice predicting a catastrophic impact on their business. The prophecy was coming true faster than he could ever have imagined. The first news alert started hitting the financial wires around 1 p.m. Eastern. Innovate Dynamics' landmark acquisition of Nexus AI reportedly collapses. Innovate stock, which had been trading at an all-time high in anticipation of the deal, immediately began to slide. But the story was about to get a powerful accelerant. A reporter from a major tech publication, having seen the viral video and the news of the deal's collapse, put two and two together. They called a source inside Innovate Dynamics, who off the record confirmed the unbelievable the deal fell apart because their lead negotiator, Dr. Aaron Hayes, was the man in the video. The story went from a human interest piece about airline discrimination to a lead story on every financial news network. Summit Air gate agents' dress code, ruling kills 1.2B tech deal, screamed the Bloomberg headline. How a pair of sneakers cost Summit Air shareholders millions, read the headline on the Wall Street Journal's website. The narrative was irresistible. It was a perfect storm of corporate arrogance, racial injustice, and staggering financial consequence. The public, already fed up with the indignities of air travel, had found a villain in Summit Air and a hero in the calm, dignified Dr. Hayes. Boycotts were being organized. Other stories of Summit Air's poor customer service and discriminatory practices began flooding social media, all under the same hashtags. In the corporate headquarters of Summit Air in Atlanta, Georgia, the PR department was in full-blown panic. Their initial tone-deaf statement, released before they knew the full scope of the disaster, was now being mercilessly mocked online. The statement read, "Summit Air is aware of an incident at JFK today. We enforce our policies consistently to ensure a safe and comfortable environment for all our passengers. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused." Inconvenience. One popular comedian tweeted, "You call vaporizing a billion-dollar deal an inconvenience? Did the passenger also find the complimentary peanuts to be unsatisfactory?" The tweet got 100,000 likes in an hour. The viral storm was no longer just about a video. It was about Summit Air's stock price, which was now in freefall. The initial dip from the bad press had turned into a nosedive as institutional investors began to grasp the magnitude of the incompetence. The company wasn't just guilty of bad PR, they were guilty of destroying value on an epic scale. The market was punishing them for it, swiftly and brutally, and the day was far from over. Jeffrey Thornton, CEO of Summit Air, slammed his office door, the sound echoing down the silent, carpeted hallway of the executive suite. His face, usually tanned and composed for television interviews, was a ghastly shade of pale. On the massive screen that dominated one wall of his office, he had 3 windows open, a live feed of a financial news channel, his company's plummeting stock ticker, and the viral video of Aaron Hayes being escorted from the gate, playing on a sickening loop. "Get me legal, get me PR, and get me the head of East Coast operations in here, now!" he roared at his executive assistant. The stock ticker was a river of blood. SA, their ticker symbol, was down 8%, then 10%, then 12%. Each percentage point represented tens of millions of dollars in market capitalization, vanishing into thin air. Jeffrey's own stock options, the bulk of his compensation package, were being shredded before his eyes. His team assembled in minutes, their faces grim. There was Catherine Finch from PR, a woman who specialized in spinning corporate mishaps into learning opportunities. There was Paul Morrissey, the grizzled chief legal counsel who saw every problem as a potential lawsuit. And there was Don Gallagher, the EVP of operations, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. What in the goddamn hell happened? Jeffrey spat, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "Who are these people? Brenda Walsh, Martin Cross. Why did they have the power to light a match to this company?" Don Gallagher cleared his throat. "Jeffrey, they were following the dress code policy as written. It's technically in the contract of carriage. It's vague, but it's there." "Vague?" Jeffrey shrieked, his voice cracking. "Don, the man was wearing shoes that cost more than your car. Since when do we stop a top-tier frequent flyer traveling to close $1 billion deal over his footwear? Do you have any idea what this makes us look like?" From a public relations standpoint, Catherine Finch began, her voice carefully modulated. "The narrative is challenging. We are being framed as both discriminatory and incompetent. The financial angle has taken this from a customer service issue to a fiduciary crisis." "No kidding, Catherine," Jeffrey shot back. "The market doesn't care about our feelings. It cares about the fact that our incompetence just nuked a deal for another major corporation. Innovate Dynamics is going to sue us into the Stone Age. Their CEO, Robert Maxwell, is already on a warpath. He told my office he wants scalps." Paul Morrissey, the lawyer, finally spoke. "Legally, our liability in the collapse of their deal is difficult to prove. We are protected by the contract of carriage, which gives us broad discretion to deny boarding. However, the reputational damage is a different animal. And if Innovate can prove gross negligence—" He let the sentence hang in the air. The financial news anchor on the screen was now interviewing a market analyst. "It's breathtaking, really," the analyst said, shaking his head. "We estimate that in the 5 hours since this story broke, Summit Air has lost approximately $80 million in market value, and it's showing no signs of stopping. This is a case study in how a failure in frontline customer service, exacerbated by a tone-deaf corporate response, can have immediate and devastating financial consequences." $80 million. The number hung in the air of the CEO's office, a monument to a single stupid decision. $80 million, Jeffrey whispered, sinking into his leather chair. It was a figure so large it was almost abstract. It was more than the annual salaries of Brenda Walsh, Martin Cross, and every other employee at JFK combined. It was a black hole, and it was threatening to swallow him whole. "So what's the plan?" he demanded, looking at the faces around him. "How do we stop the bleeding?" Catherine Finch stepped forward. First, a new statement. A full, unreserved apology. We announce the immediate unpaid suspension of the 2 employees involved, pending a full investigation. Second, we reach out to Dr. Hayes directly. We offer him a personal apology from you, Jeffrey. We offer him free flights for life, a major charitable donation in his name to a non-profit of his choice. We have to make him whole publicly. "And what about the money?" Jeffrey asked, his voice hollow. "How do we get the $80 million back?" Everyone in the room was silent. They all knew the truth. They couldn't. That money was gone, burned on the altar of Brenda Walsh's ego. The stock wouldn't just bounce back. Trust once shattered doesn't glue back together overnight. They had become a punchline, a cautionary tale. "Find me everything there is to know about this Dr. Aaron Hayes," Jeffrey commanded, his eyes narrowing. "Find me his pressure points. Find me something, anything we can use to contain this." But as he would soon discover, Dr. Aaron Hayes was a man of impeccable character. The only leverage anyone had was the truth, and the truth was a weapon that was currently pointed directly at Summit Air's heart. The meltdown was far from over. The board of directors had been silent so far, but they were watching the stock ticker too, and they would be looking for someone to blame. In the cold, unforgiving calculus of the modern world, actions have consequences. But rarely are they so swift, so proportional, and so utterly devastating. For the individuals who had orbited the incident at Gate B32, karma was not a distant philosophical concept. It was a tidal wave that arrived overnight, and it washed away their lives as they knew them. Brenda's world began to shrink the moment Maya Jenkins's video went viral. It started with her phone, which began to buzz with a ferocity she'd never experienced. At first, it was notifications from her own social media friends, asking if that was her in the video. Then the floodgates opened. Her phone number, somehow unearthed from the digital ether, was posted on a notorious internet forum. The buzzing became a constant demonic hum. Hundreds, then thousands of messages poured in. They were a torrent of pure vitriol. "Hope you enjoy the unemployment line, you power-tripping hag. Your face is the official logo of petty tyrants everywhere. My 5-year-old has better judgment." Summit Air shame. Worse than the hate were the memes. Her smug, triumphant face from the video was photoshopped onto images of dictators of movie villains of hall monitors. There were endless pictures of Aaron's Lanvin sneakers captioned, "The shoes that broke an airline." She threw the phone across the room, but she couldn't escape. When she turned on the TV, a cable news pundit was dissecting her body language, calling her a textbook example of misplaced authority. The call from Summit Air's Vice President of Human Resources came the next day. It wasn't a conversation, it was a notification. "Brenda, this is Susan Miller." The voice on the phone was cold, devoid of any warmth. "Due to your actions on October 14th, which violated multiple company policies, including our code of conduct and social media guidelines, your employment with Summit Air is terminated effective immediately. Your system access has been revoked. A third-party service will courier a box with your personal effects from your locker by the end of the week. Do not attempt to access company property." 19 years of service, of showing up early and staying late, of dealing with irate passengers and cancelled flights, erased in a 45-second phone call. The union, which she had paid dues to for nearly 2 decades, issued a public statement that threw her under the bus, calling her actions an egregious departure from the standards of service and respect our members uphold. They wouldn't touch her case. She was radioactive. A week later, desperate for some sign of support, she watched with a flicker of hope as a "We Stand with Brenda Walsh" GoFundMe page was launched by a political commentator who claimed she was a victim of the woke mob. She envisioned a war chest, a legal fund vindication. The fund raised $47 and a deluge of 1-cent donations, each accompanied by a comment like, "Here's a penny for your thoughts. Maybe next time you'll have one." Her would-be champion abandoned the campaign within a day. Her final crushing humiliation came at her local supermarket. As she stood in the checkout line, she heard a teenager whisper to his friend, "Hey, look, it's the sneaker lady." The cashier, a young woman who had always been friendly, refused to make eye contact. Brenda fled the store, leaving her groceries behind. The smug fortress of Gate B32 had crumbled, leaving her exposed and alone in the ruins of her life. Martin Cross experienced a more refined corporate execution. He was summoned to the Atlanta headquarters, a trip he assumed was to strategize a response. He walked into a sterile boardroom to find not his direct supervisor, but Don Gallagher, the executive vice president of operations and a lawyer from the legal department. There were no pleasantries. "Martin Bourke." Gallagher began, his voice flat as a runway. "Your file says you've been with us for 24 years. You've been a station manager for 12. In all that time, what would you say is the primary role of a manager in a customer-facing situation?" Martin flustered, stammered, "To support my staff, to enforce company policy." "Wrong," Gallagher cut him off. "The primary role is to exercise judgment. It's to de-risk situations. It's to understand the difference between the letter of the law and its spirit, and to protect the brand and the assets of this company. On October 14th, you had a choice. You could have used the authority and discretion we pay you for to diffuse a minor issue. Instead, you abdicated your responsibility, hid behind a junior employee, and allowed a $100 problem to escalate into a $150 million catastrophe. You didn't just fail to manage, you actively enabled the disaster. The lawyer slid a single piece of paper across the polished table, a severance agreement. It was insultingly small. We are restructuring the leadership at JFK, Gallagher continued. Your position has been eliminated. You can sign this, or you can be terminated for cause based on gross negligence in your managerial duties. If you choose the latter, we will see you in court. You have 5 minutes to decide. Martin's career didn't just end, it evaporated. He took the severance. Back home, he began applying for other jobs. His experience was extensive, but the world was small. In one interview for an operations role at a cargo carrier, the hiring manager leaned forward and asked, "I have to ask, Martin Cross, Summit Air, you're that guy, aren't you? From the dress code incident." Martin tried to explain, to offer context, to paint himself as a victim of a vague policy and a difficult employee. But all the manager heard was a man who couldn't make a decision, a man who crumbled under the slightest pressure. He didn't get the job. He sat in his study that night, staring at a wall of service awards and commendation plaques from Summit Air. They were monuments to a life's work that now meant less than nothing. He was a case study in failed leadership, a ghost in the airline industry. Geoffrey Thornton's end came in the silent, suffocating atmosphere of the Summit Air boardroom on the 50th floor. The 10 board members sat like stone idols around the massive mahogany table. The stock ticker projected on the wall had flatlined at a price 17% lower than it was a week ago. Marcus Thorne, the board's most influential and ruthless member, spoke first. "Geoffrey, we've seen the latest report. We lost the Goldman Sachs corporate account this morning. We lost Pfizer yesterday. The total projected loss from corporate contracts alone is now estimated at $40 million a year. This is no longer a PR issue. This is a fiduciary crisis." Geoffrey, desperate, tried one last gambit. "Marcus, this is a social media firestorm, a witch hunt. It's a vocal minority. Don't you dare!" Thorne's voice was like ice. "Do not insult our intelligence by blaming this on the woke mob. I don't care about politics. I care about shareholder value. You fostered a culture so focused on penny pinching and on-time departures that your employees forgot how to think. You built a house of cards, and one of your own people lit a match, and when it started to burn, your response was to issue a pathetic, condescending apology that poured gasoline on the fire. You are the captain of this ship, Geoffrey, and you have steered it directly into an iceberg." He was presented, not with a choice, but with an ultimatum. Resign, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. In return, the board would not pursue a for-cause termination, which would allow them to claw back over $10 million in bonuses. If he refused, they would fire him, and their legal team would sue him for breach of fiduciary duty. The arrogance finally drained from Geoffrey's face, replaced by the pale, slack-jawed look of defeat. He signed the resignation papers. His reign was over. As he was escorted from the building by a security guard, not in handcuffs, but with a cold finality that was just as humiliating, he saw his official corporate portrait already being taken down in the lobby. He, the master of the skies, had been grounded permanently. While the architects of his humiliation were crashing to earth, Aaron Hayes was finding his footing on higher ground. The day after the incident, he sat in Robert Maxwell's office. Maxwell Innovate's CEO wasn't licking his wounds, he was sharpening his sword. "They didn't just disrespect you, Aaron," Maxwell said, pacing his office. "They disrespected this entire company. They handed us a narrative of David versus Goliath, and they cast themselves as the idiot Goliath. The market hates incompetence. The public loves an underdog. We're not going to be victims here. We're going to use this." The first call was to the CEO of Quantum Leap Analytics. Aaron made the call himself, expecting a tough sell. He was wrong. "Dr. Hayes," the CEO on the other end said, his voice alive with energy. "I've been hoping you'd call. I saw the video. I saw your interview. Any man who can maintain that level of dignity and composure while his career is being sabotaged over footwear is a man I want in my corner." The Nexus AI deal was built on technology. Let's build a new deal built on character. When can you be here? It was a stunning reversal. The new deal, a strategic partnership, was better in every way. It was more collaborative, more financially sound, and it came with an ocean of positive press. Investors eager to be on the right side of the story clamored to get in. Top-tier AI engineers inspired by the tale of Innovate's loyalty to its executive left competitors to join the new project. 2 months later, Robert Maxwell sent out a company-wide memo announcing a new C-suite position. Dr. Aaron Hayes was being promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, tasked with overseeing all high-level partnerships. The memo ended with a line that was read throughout Silicon Valley. "Aaron has shown us that true strength isn't just about closing deals, but about how you conduct yourself when others try to tear you down. His grace under pressure is now one of this company's greatest strategic assets." He had not sought revenge. He had simply continued to do his job with excellence and integrity. But in a stunning display of cosmic rebalancing, the world had conspired to give him something far better vindication. His ordeal had not defined him, but it had revealed him, and in doing so, had unlocked a level of success he had never imagined. 6 months had passed. The chill of that October morning had given way to the warmth of a late April spring. Dr. Aaron Hayes sat not in the functional domestic first class of a Summit Airjet, but in the hushed, refined opulence of a British Airways 777 waiting for the doors to close for its transatlantic journey from San Francisco to London. The cabin was a symphony of quiet competence. The scent of leather and lavender hung in the air. The flight attendants moved with an unhurried grace, their smiles seeming genuine, their offers of champagne or sparkling water delivered with a soft-spoken professionalism that was in itself a form of luxury. On the polished burl wood tray in front of him lay a tablet displaying the first quarter results of the Quantum Fusion Initiative, the official name for the Innovate Quantum Leap Partnership. The numbers glowed. User adoption was 200% ahead of projections. Revenue streams were already diversifying. It was more than a success. It was a phenomenon. Aaron Hayes was its chief architect. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, and on his feet, the very same pair of black Lanvin leather sneakers. They were slightly more broken in now, with a few faint creases from a dozen flights to oversee the project's launch, but they remained immaculate. They were no longer just shoes. They were a part of his story, a silent testament. He hadn't sought the notoriety, but it had found him anyway. In the weeks following the incident, he had been deluged with thousands of emails and messages. Many were from strangers, people of color, who shared their own stories of corporate slights, of being made to feel small, of having their professionalism questioned for arbitrary reasons. He had become an unwilling icon for a silent, frustrated demographic. A major business magazine had run a feature on him titled "The Man Who Cost an Airline a Fortune by Being Right." He found the fame uncomfortable, but he also felt a new sense of responsibility. He had been given a platform, and he began using it quietly, joining the boards of 2 non-profits dedicated to advancing minority executives in the tech sector. A flight attendant, a distinguished woman in her 50s with kind eyes, paused by his seat. "Dr. Hayes?" she asked softly. Aaron looked up from his tablet. "Yes." "Forgive me for disturbing you. I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to have you with us today." She glanced down at his feet, and a knowing smile touched her lips. "My son is in his final year at the London School of Economics. They actually teach your story now. It's a case study in his corporate governance class. They call it the Summit Air Precedent, a lesson on how corporate culture is a tangible asset that can be destroyed from the bottom up." Aaron was momentarily taken aback. A case study. It was one thing to be a headline, another to be academic curriculum. He felt a strange mix of pride and weariness. "I hope your son finds it an instructive lesson," he managed to say with a small smile. "He finds it inspiring," she replied, before moving on with a polite nod. Aaron leaned his head back, the soft leather cool against his neck. He looked out the triple-paned window. In the distance, taxiing toward a domestic terminal, was a Summit airplane. Its livery, once a symbol of reliability to him, now looked dated and sad. The airline had survived, but only just. Their rebranding campaign was a constant source of online mockery. They were profitable again, but their brand was toxic, their growth stunted. They had become a permanent case study in what not to do. He thought of Brenda Walsh, a woman so consumed by her little sliver of power that she couldn't see the world beyond her rule book. He thought of Martin Cross, a man whose cowardice masqueraded as policy. He even thought of Geoffrey Thornton, a CEO who flew so high he couldn't see the rot in the foundations of his own company. He felt a flicker of something, not quite pity, but a profound sadness for the smallness of their world. They had tried to put him in a box to define him by their own narrow standards, and in the end had only succeeded in building prisons for themselves. His victory was not in their ruin, but in the simple fact that his world had kept expanding while theirs had collapsed. The deep thrum of the Rolls-Royce engines spooling up pulled him from his reverie. The plane began its powerful roll down the runway, pushing him back into his seat. He watched as the ground fell away the concrete, the other planes, the sprawling city shrinking until it was just a map of itself. As the jet broke through the initial layer of coastal fog and into the brilliant, unending sunshine above the clouds, Aaron felt a sense of profound peace. He was climbing. He was leaving the noise and the mess behind, ascending to a new altitude. The meeting in London wasn't just a meeting. It was a victory lap for his team, a celebration of what they had built from the ashes of a collapsed deal. He had learned that true power wasn't about enforcing petty rules or occupying a corner office. It was about resilience. It was about turning a moment of public humiliation into a source of private strength. It was about knowing your own value, even when, especially when others tried to tell you that you were worthless. He closed his eyes not out of fatigue, but to savor the moment. He was no longer just Dr. Aaron Hayes, the executive. He was Dr. Aaron Hayes, the case study, the symbol, the man who proved that sometimes the best response to injustice is simply to rise above it on your own terms and to build your own future in the clear, clean air. Dr. Aaron Hayes' story is a stark reminder that in our hyper-connected world, the actions of one person can create ripples that become tidal waves. A single moment of prejudice, a single abuse of power didn't just cause a personal inconvenience. It triggered a financial earthquake, reshaping careers and the future of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It demonstrates that character is capital, and dignity has a value that can and will eventually show up on the bottom line. Karma, in this case, wasn't a mystical force. It was the swift and logical consequence of a company's culture failing its most basic test. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that respect and dignity should be non-negotiable in business and in life, please help this story reach more people. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe for more true stories where the scales of justice and karma are finally balanced. Let us know in the comments, what do you think was the most critical mistake Summit Air made? We want to hear from you.